Shalom Aleichem, everybody. We're up to Shevuos, Daf Yud Amud Beis. It's around, I would say, like 12 lines from the bottom. Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Before we get involved in this sugya, it's a brand new sugya in Kachem. It needs two akdamas. Number one is we have to understand that there's a huge difference when somebody's makdish something to the Beis HaMikdash. There are two types of kedusha. There's kedushas haguf and kedushas damim. And there's a big difference between the two. Kedushas haguf, if you take a look at the chart, has two very distinct halachas. Number one, like the word sound, the guf is kaddish, the actual core item, the physical object is kaddish, and because it's kaddish, if it's tamim, if there's no reason to redeem it or transfer the kedusha onto something else, you're not allowed to do it. Examples would be karbanis. Person is makdish, an animal, as a carbon. He says this should be an oila, a shlamim. Then that becomes kaddish right away. The guf becomes kaddish, and also you cannot redeem that. You can't transfer that kedusha as long as it's royal mizbeach. You have to bring that physical animal that you were makdish, that has kedushas haguf. You have to bring it onto the mizbeach. Kedushas damim is different. Kedushas damim is when you're makdish an item that isn't royal hakrava. You can't bring it onto the mizbeach. Right? Let's say you're makdish a table or a chair. So what happens is, because you can't bring it onto the mizbeach, hagdish only owns the value of the item. It's called kedushas damim, the value. And what hagdish does is it sells it, and whatever money they get from the sale belongs to hagdish, and they buy whatever they need for bedek habayis. And that is transferable. You could transfer the kedusha from, let's say, a table that you're makdish onto something else, because the physical object itself isn't kaddish. It's kaddish for its value, hence the name kedushas damim. Now, every year, second introduction, every year, they would raise funds for karbanis, to buy karbanis, animals, for the new year. So the new year started in Nisan, right? So be'echad ba'ader mashmiyin al ashkalim, the Mishnah Shkalim says, we start raising money to buy the karbanis for the coming year. And they would buy, lamashal, tamidim, every day you had to bring two karbanis, right? Tamid shel shachar, tamid shel bein rabayim. So times that by 365 times 2, so you have 730 karbanis just from the karbanis of the tamidim. Inevitably, you had karbanis left over. Why? Because Rashi already quotes Gemara and Erichin that at any given day, any time, you had to have extra backup animals that were already checked 4 days to make sure they're not balemumim. You had to keep it in stock in a storage house in the lishkas atloim. So in case you don't have, or whatever the karbanis of the day that you took out are balemumim, you can replace it right away. You can replace it right away with karbanis that have already been checked 4 days. So because that's the halacha, so the last day of the year, the end of Adar, when you took the last two karbanis that were bought with the funds of the previous year, you are going to have at least 4 karbanis left over, 4 animals that are hekdesh b'kedushas haguf, left over because of the halacha that you have to always have in stock extra. So the question is, what do you do with these extra animals, these extra karbanos that are kadosh b'kedushas haguf? They have kedushas haguf, right? They're roy lakrov essentially. So what do you do with it? You can't use it for the next year. Why not? Because the next year, karbanos must be bought with the new funds that are raised for the coming year. And these are animals that are bought with the funds from the previous year. So you can't use those animals anymore for karbanos tamidim, so now you're stuck with these animals. You also can't be paided because they have kedushas haguf, and we just saw kedushas haguf, you can't be paided. So that is the introduction to our sugya today. So comes Ula b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Tamidim shleihutzruchu letzibur. When you have karbanos tamidim that the tzibur doesn't need anymore, like we just explained, the end of the year it's extras. What do? Says Rabbi Yochanan, niftin tamimim. You can actually redeem it. You can transfer the kedusha that is on these animals, kedushas haguf, and put it onto something else. That's a big chiddush, because you're not allowed to do that usually. So Yosef, Rabbi Rabbi said over this chiddush in the name of his Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan, Omar le Rav Chizda. So Rav Chizda says, Man sayis lach le Rabbi Yochanan Rabbach. Who listens to you? Who will believe you and your Rebbe, Rabbi Yochanan? The kedusha shebehen lehechen halcha. Where did the kedusha disappear to? It's kedusha saguf. Where did they go? Just disappeared? Right? That's why usually can't be paid it. It's Kaddish B'Kedusha Saguf, so where did it go? Amarle, so Rabbah says, what do you mean? At loitizbrid lo mikdush ben lechen halcha? You don't say that you can be paid it? V'hatnan, it's a Mefursha Mishnah. There's a Mishnah not by the Karbonis Tamidin, but by the Ketairis. Moiser HaKetairis, the leftover of the Ketairis. Right? If you say Pitum HaKetairis in the morning, you probably know that they prepared 365 manim for the year, every day. A mana, pras shal shachros, pras ben arabayim. You had to prepare the ketairos in the beginning of the year, and they would make them for the entire year, plus 3 manim of Yom Kippur, where the Kohen Gadol stuck his hand and took a maloi chafnav, which is around the chatzi mana, so you had 2.5 manim left over at least by the end of the year from the ketairos. So again, ketairos presumably is kedusha saguf. So the moiser ketairos, what do you do with it? Says the Mishnah, ma'a oisen ba, mafrishin memena, so the Bach, and it seems from Rashi, Rishon not goyres mimena, just mafrishin scharu umnin, right? You would separate from the Trumas Alishka money to pay the umnin, the people who prepared the ketairos. We know the Gemara in Yuma says they were Beis Haftinas. Beis Haftinas had a monopoly over the ketairos because they were the only ones who knew what Mala Oshan is, what makes the ketairos go up, the smoke go up straight, and they charged Shnei Maser Mana. Charge a lot of money every year to prepare the ketairos. So we take money from the Trumas Alishka, we separate it for the umnin for Beis Haftinas. Rashi says we're zoicha in the money for them on their behalf. So now that money goes out from hektish, from Trumas Alishka to Chulin, because now we're zoicha in the money for the hadyotis, for Beis Haftinas to pay them their salary. And then once that money is Chulin, now Mechalan oisa al moyes umnin v'noisnin oisa leumnin b'scharan. Now you take the ketairos and you take the kedusha from the ketairos and you transfer it onto that money that you're mazaka for Beis Haftinas. So basically exchange it, instead of them receiving the money that you just were mazaka on their behalf, you're just zoicha on their behalf. Now you take the ketairos and you transfer the kedusha from the ketairos onto that money, and you pay them with the ketairos instead. That's how you pay Beis Haftinas. Okay? And now, once Beis Haftinas has it, you take it now, you buy it back from Beis Haftinas. Now that they hold on to that ketairos, it's already chulin, because you're paid it, because you transfer the kedusha onto the money that you'd separated from the Trumas Alishka to begin with. So now the ketairos is in their possession, it's back in their possession, it's chulin. And now you take from the new funds that you raised for the next year and you repurchase that ketairos with the new funds, and now it's kosher to use for the next year. Okay, that's the whole process you use. But Hanegele in Yanenu, what's relevant to us from that Mishnah is, what do you see? You see that they were able to be paida the ketairos, which is kadosh b'kedusha saguf. The moiser ketairos, what did they do with it? They're able to redeem that kedusha that the ketairos had and put it onto the money. What do you mean? V'amai neima kedusha shebehen lechen olcha. You should say the same problem. You should have the same issue. Where did the kedusha go? It's kedusha saguf. How are you allowed to be paid it? So what do you see? What do you see? Says Rabbi to Rav Chizda. You're asking me on my Rabbi Yochanan. Who's going to believe? Who's going to listen to Rabbi Yochanan? How can he say that the leftover animals that were designated for the karbonos tamidim, how could he say that you could be paid to them? Hagam, it's kodesh bekedusha saguf, and you can't be paid to kedusha saguf. Mishnah says that you can be paid the moiser ketairos. So Omar Lei, so Rav Chizda said, no. Ketairos ka'amrit, shani ketairos is different. You know why? It's not kedusha saguf. The kedushas damim hu. It doesn't have kedushas saguf. It has kedushas damim. In other words, when you prepare the ketairos, you put it into the machteshes and you start grinding it, and you prepare it. It only has Kedushas Damim until you're ready to mamish use it for the avodah, and you put it into a klisharis, which at that point it becomes kadosh b'kedushas aguf. But before that, in the machtesh still, it's Kedushas Damim. So if you didn't use it yet, right, so it's still Kedushas Damim. So Mameli, you can be paid it, so it's no problem. You can't ask from that Mishnah in Shkola, by Moisra Ketairis, because Ketairis is Kedushas Damim. So the Gemara says, Rabbah says, really? Ketairis is Kedushas Damim, and that's why you can be paid it? Not so fast. Elo me'ato leitifsil b'tvul yoim. It should not become puzzle if a tvul yoim touches that ketairis. Okay, quick introduction. What's a tvul yoim? Somebody who was tamei. He needed to become tahir, so he went to the mikveh, but he also needs hair of shemesh, and the sun didn't set yet. So such a guy is called a tvul yoim, and he doesn't have the level of tumah that a regular person who's tamei before he goes to the mikveh has. He only passels. He passels whatever he touches. He's not matama to the point where that now, whatever he touched, can be matama other things. He just passels it. So the halacha is that tvul yom can only passel whatever is kaddish bekedushas aguf, not kedushas damim. So the question is, if ketairos is kedushas damim, elamayata loiti fasel betvul yom, so then it shouldn't be subject to the psul of a tvul yom. Allah matanya. Why do we learn a brayso not like that? Nitna b'machteshes, nifseles b'tvul yoim. As soon as you put it into the machteshes, it's nifseles b'tvul yoim. Ooh, right away. As soon as he's maktesh it for the ketairos, even before it reaches the klisharis, you just as soon as you grind it and you're saying it's for the ketairos, that's already kaddish b'kedushas aguf. That's why it's nifseles b'tvul yoim. So Rabbah says to Rav Chisda, don't answer me ketairos is different because kaddish b'kedushas damim. It's not. It's kedushas aguf because you see it becomes possible but negias tvul yoim. V'chi tema, and if you'll tell me kol kedushas damim mifsali b'tvul yoim, it's not a raya that it becomes possible b'tvul yoim that it's kedushas aguf. Maybe it's kedushas damim, and all kedushas damim are also subject to the psul of a negia b'tvul yoim. In other words, you can't prove from there that ketairos is kedushas aguf, right? That's the conversation here. It's ketairos kedushas aguf, and in the middle of a riot to Rabbi Yochanan Zalocha that sometimes kedushas aguf could be redeemed. The kedusha could be transferred onto something else, or is it kedushas damim? I mean, you don't have a riot. If Chizda wants to say you don't have a riot, it's kedushas damim. Rabbi says kedushas aguf. I have a riot. It's kedushas aguf. You know how? You know how I know? Because it becomes pasul benegias tvul yoim. And if you're going to tell me no, all kedushas damim become pasul benegias tvul yoim, you don't have a riot from that. Says Rabbi, that's not true. Because Vatanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Hamenochois, when a person brings a carbon mincha, right? The menocha is from a single person. The person who wants to bring a carbon mincha, moyalin behen mishahiktashu. You can be moyo as soon as the bailam is makdish, that flour, that mincha. To hegdish, you already could be moyal if you use it. Oh, kacha bikli. But what if you already put it into klisharis? Oh, then it becomes kedushas aguf, and it's uchsheru leposel b'tvul yoim even mechusar kippurim ubelina. So what do you see here? Kachu bekli in, loy kachu bekli loy. So you see that kedushas damim is not subject to the psul of a negia from a tvul yoim. Because the psul of a negia of a tvul yoim is only once it's kachu bekli. Once it elevates, the kedusha elevates to the status of kedushas aguf, that's when the Mishnah says it becomes pasul b'negias tvul yoim. But as long as you didn't put it to klisharis, you just makdish the mincha, then it only has kedushas damim, and it's not pasul b'negias tvul yoim. So don't tell me that all kedushas damim is pasul b'negias tvul yoim, and that's why ketaitis is pasul b'machteshes b'negias tvul yoim. If you see that ketaitis is pasul b'machteshes b'negias tvul yoim, must be it's kaddish b'kedushas haguf. So the Gemara says, elamai. So what are you going to tell me? Very nice raya. That the ketaitis is kedushas hagufi. The ketaitis tak is kedushas haguf from Uriah, because you see that ketaitis becomes pasul b'negias tvul yoim. Elomeyato asks the Gemara, what the pasul belina? If it's true that the ketaitis is kaddish b'kedushas haguf, and that's why it's pasul b'negias tvul yoim, elomeyato to pasul belina, so she's subject to another psul. Aloma tanan, what's psul belina? If you leave it overnight in the machteshes. Aloma tanan, hakoimetz, valavoina, vaktairis, a minchas kahanim, a minchas kohen mishuach, a minchas nesachim. Right? You have the koimetz when a kohen does kmitza, right? So he takes out a little from the mincha, right, with 3 fingers, and so that gets burnt onto the mizbeach. V'halavayna, and the levayna, the frankincense, from a minchas yachad that's brought together with the mincha. V'haktoiris, ding, 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 ding. One of the items mentioned on the list is ktoiris. A minchas kahanim, and a mincha of kahanim, which is, Rashi says it's kolol, becomes completely burnt onto the mizbeach. There's no kmitzi even on that. Minchas kohen mishuach, and the mincha of a kohen mishuach, minchas chavitin of the kohen gadol we brought every day, right? And the minchas nisachim, moyel and behen, your moyel mishahuktashu. Once you are makdash it, you say it's kaddish, it belongs to hagdish, you're already moyel. Moyel mi'ila, it means you're not allowed to have enough from it, right? Even kedushas damim, you're not allowed to have enough from any hagdish, any level hagdish. Kedushas hagdish, kedushas damim, it doesn't matter. But kadsha bekli, but once you're putting it into a kli sharis, huchshiruli pasul b'tfil yoim, even mechusik kipurim uvelina, then all of a sudden it elevates to the status of kedushas haguf, and now it's subject to all these sensitive other halachas, which even a negiah tvil yoim passes it, or a negiah of mechusik kipurim. Mechusik kipurim means somebody who actually had tvila and Hashem, but it didn't bring a carbon yet. Ubelina, if it stays overnight in the keli, so still, what do you see from here? Kachabikli in. It's only if you put it into the klisharas, so now it's kaddish b'kedushas haguf. But loy kachabikli loy. But if you weren't magdash in bekeli, then it's not posel belina. So what do you see from here? That anything that is kedushas damim alone isn't posel belina. So oibazoi and kedushas haguf is posel belina. So Rav Chizda is asking to Rabbah, if it's true that the Ketores, according to you, is Kaddish B'Kedushas Haguf, then it should be Pasal B'Lina, because Kedushas Haguf is subject to the law of Lina. So the Gemara says, Amali, Rabbah said no. Lina ka'amret shari Ketores. Ketores is different. Since the Tzura is B'chal Hashana Kula. So here Rashi explains, what does that mean? That really, I'll tell you, Ketores is Kaddish B'Kedushas Haguf. Lina? No, Lina over here doesn't passel. Why? Because it seems from Rashi over here, the way Rashi explains this, is that the yesod of the psul of Lina is, we don't want the meat, or whatever you're bringing as a carbon, to spoil by leaving it overnight. But since Ketores doesn't get spoiled, it retains its appearance, same appearance. So therefore, even though it's Kedushas Haguf, it doesn't become Pasal Belina. That's it. So we make an exception to Ketores, even though it's Kedushas Haguf, it doesn't become Pasal Belina. Tosfos over here has a different pshat. He has a bunch of questions, and he says Tzurasa doesn't mean the Tzura of the Ketores. It sounds like Tosfos is saying it means the Tzura of the mitzvah. She'ikr mitzvasa bekach lasoisa kula betchilas hashana. When do you make the Ketores? You prepare the whole Ketores in the beginning of the year for 365 days. If you prepare at the beginning of the year, how can it be psolina? You prepare at the beginning of the year for the whole year. So hoil v'tzurasa, that is gufa the tzuras mitzvah, how the mitzvah is done. B'chal hashana kula, that you prepare it in the beginning of the year for the entire year. So there is no psolina by Ketores because the tzuras mitzvah kachi. But either way, right now, Rabbah answered Rav Chizda's question by saying, I have a raya from a Mishnah Shkolim, Moisera Ketores, you could do the same thing as Rabbi Yochanan suggests that you do for the karbanos tzibur that are left over at the end of the year, which means you could be poida kedushas haguf. Rabbah said, I have a Mishnah, Moisera Ketores, you could be poida, even though they're kaddish b'kedushas haguf. Rav Chizda wants to say kedushas damim. Rabbah rejected that. Ketores is kaddish b'kedushas haguf, and still the Mishnah's advice is transfer the kedusha from kedushas haguf. So asks the Gemara, okay, so Rabbah answered beautifully, but nachaltz, still, mekal makom kasha. What is Rabbah going to do with the resounding question that's still echoing in our minds, the question of Rav Chizda, but where did the kedusha go? We know Like the first chart, you can't transfer Kedusha from Kedusha Haguf. You can't. Where did it go? Disappeared somewhere. Amar Rabba. So Rabba said, a big chiddush. Tell you what. Leave Bezdin Masna Alein. Wow. These 5 words, Leave Bezdin Masna Alein. The heart of Bezdin makes a condition on them. Which means that when the Beis HaMikdash buys all these karbanos tzibur, so they know that they're going to be leftover karbanos. Betchila, they already know it. So what do? They make a condition. Sounds like it's not a verbal condition. Leiv Bezdin. It's built into the sale. When Bezdin buys these karbanos, that it's al das Bezdin, that's they're buying it with the intention that whatever is not going to be used should not become Kodesh B'Kedusha Saguf. Only in Hutzruchu. Whatever's going to end up being used for a carbon, an actual carbon tamid, an oila, then it becomes Kodesh B'Kedusha Saguf. And lav, but if at the end you're going to realize that we didn't need it, yiyu l'dmeyan. So in other words, it's almost like the status still hangs in the air until you follow through with each animal, and that's when it's decided whether the animal is Kadosh B'Kedushas Haguf or not. So, if so, v'mlav yulad meyan. So, if taka, it turns out that at the end those animals, the extras, weren't used, then it taka is not Kadosh B'Kedushas Haguf. It's only Kadosh B'Kedushas Damim, and therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan, you can be paid it. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye asked Rabba, whoa, not so fast. V'homarhu da Omar, you said, Rabba, you said in Tamura, you said Higdish Zachar, if a person is Makdish, a ram, an ayil, which is Zachar, we always call it a Zachar. Why are we calling it a Zachar? Because a Nekev is not kosher la'oila. So usually it's an ayil, it's a Zachar, so we always refer to it as a Zachar when it comes to oila. Higdish Zachar, a person is makdish, and ayil is an oila, but he's not makdish this ayil per se. He says ledamav. I want this to become hekdish, but I want it to become kedushas damim, which means I'm going to sell this, and then I'm going to buy with the money, which the money belongs to hekdish. I'll buy another animal, and that second animal, I'll bring as a carbon. Says Rabbah, Abaya says, you Rabbah said, in such a case, kadosh kedushas haguf, right away. The animal that you're makdash b'kedushas damim, if that animal is roy la'krova, that animal itself can be brought into the mizbeach, even though you said ledamav, it's right away kadosh b'kedushas haguf. Your tanai doesn't help in such a case, right? It's nitfas kedushas haguf. It's chal kedushas haguf right away. Why? Because why go a second step? This is worthy to be nikra from the mizbeach. So this is kadosh b'kedushas haguf. So asks Abaya to the Heilige Rabba, I don't understand. Here, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about over here when you buy all these animals that are all roy la'akrava. And what are you telling me? That lev bezdin masna alein, that it should only be ladamav. But in a case where you're making a tanai on an animal and the animal itself is roy la'akrava, tanai doesn't work. That's Abaya's kasha to Rabba. So Rabba said no, like kasha. 2 different cases. In the case where I said it's Kodesh Kedushas Haguf right away, it's because you wanted to sell this to buy what? The same thing. You wanted to buy another animal for an oila. You want to buy the same thing? So let this be Kodesh Kedushas Haguf. So this is right away Kodesh Kedushas Haguf. In the case of Rabbi Yochanan, where he says, Lev Bezin Masn Alein, that those korbanos should be sold, we're not looking to buy other animals to be brought as an oila. It's the Omer L'Dmeina Sachim. In that case, we're looking to buy a completely different item, which this animal can't fill the need of whatever item we want to buy with. So Mamela, we don't say in such a case, Kadosh B'Kedushas Haguf right away, and therefore the Tanai of Lev Bezin Masn Alein works. All right, Abaye doesn't back down. Isve Abaye, so Abaye asks weiter. Par v'sar shal Yom Kippurim she'ovdu. What if you have a par and a sar of Yom Kippur that was lost before you shechted it, v'hifresh, achayim tachteim, and you separated others. Instead, V'chein se'ira avodah zara, or se'ira avodah zara, which are karbanas tzibur. I guess they were over in Isra avodah zara b'shoigig al pi the hayrav bezdin, a mistaken hayrav bezdin, so they have to bring se'ira avodah zara. So they're karbanas tzibur she'avdu, and they were lost. V'hifar shechem tachteyan, and then you separated other se'irim instead of those. Kulon yamusu. If you found them after you brought other ones already, then what do you do with them? Then you have to let them die. Div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Lozer, Rabbi Shimon Oimrim, yiru achi yistavu. You should let them pasture in the fields until they become balei mumim, and once they become balei mumim, you can be paid to them, the yimachru, and then you could sell them, the yiplu demeyan, yimachru yiplu demeyan. You could sell them, and the value, whatever money you get for their value, becomes kaddish, the yiplu demeyan lenadava, and then you could buy nidvus tzibur, nidvus karbanas tzibur. She'ein chatas tzibur mesa, because they hold you don't let it die. So halach l'mashem Sinai by chatas, that chatas tzibur, only chatas yochid is mesa, but not chatas tzibur. But either way, asks the Gemara, why wait until it becomes a balmum and then sell it and then use the money to buy new ones? V'amai, why do you have to wait and go through this whole process? Lema, right away, lev best masna alein. Let's say Rabba's Chiddush. Rabba established a tremendous yisoid that any time the Beis Hamikdash buys karbanas tzibur, whatever belongs to the tzibur, there's always a lev bezin masna alein. That if it doesn't end up being used in the intended way, the way they planned to use it, then lev is not originally. Then it wasn't kaddish b'kedusha saguf. Turns out it was kaddish b'kedusha damim. So right away, you can be paid it right away. Kedusha damim is royal opinion right away. You don't have to wait till it pastures and becomes a balmum. So why do you have to wait for that? If Rabba's yisoid is true, answers the Gemara, avudin ka'amrit, shani avudin deloy shchichi. You're talking about a case where karbanas tzibur went lost. That almost never happens. If it almost never happens, then lev bezdin is not masna lein, because lo shchiach. Bezdin doesn't think about that case in the beginning of the year, so it's not really shchiach, and maybe it's not included in that t'nai. So you do have to wait until they become balei mumim, and then you're paid it. So now Abaye asks from the opposite extreme. Ooh, you mean you don't say lev bezin masna alein when it's lo shchiach? Harei para aduma de lo shchicha, right? Rashi says over here lo shchicha. Why not? Rashi says b'chol yemei bayis rishon bayis sheni lo osel l'sheva. Only 7 paradumas in a span of 900 years, 410 years of the first Beis Hamikdash, 70 years of Golas, 420 years. You have literally 900 years, only 7 cows. How shchiach is that? Almost like lo shchiach at all. So, and what do you see there? Over there, you have to come on to lev bezin masna lein, as we'll see in a moment. But what's interesting about Abaye is Abaye just asked from 2 different sources to reject Rabba's yisoid, to prove that you don't say lev bezin masna lein. All of a sudden he's asking, you don't just say lev bezin masna lein, you even say it in the case of lo shchiach by paraduma. I want to know, which side is Abaye on? Which team is he on? Is he on the team of lev bezin masna lein, or is he on the team of lo yamrim lev bezin masna lein? And Ritva says, they say, Gavaldig, Abaye is a Talmud. Abaye heard a chiddush from his Rabbi Rabbah. He accepts it right away. Avada, that's the truth. He's just trying to understand. So he's bringing from this Mishnah, that Brisa, trying to figure out from the different Brises whether Rabbah's yisoid, how to reconcile Rabbah with all these different questions. But it's not that he's trying to ask, he's trying to understand. He used to have a Rebbe, he always used to ask me when I learned with him. Shtieble rebellious, he said, Yoel, you trying to ask or you trying to understand? Usually I try to ask. But Abaye is trying to understand. So Mameli is asking for paraduma. Hare paraduma l'shchicha. The Tanya, we learned, para nivdis al kol psil sheba. A paraduma, right? We know a paraduma is brought to be matar people from tumas meis. And it wasn't shechted, wasn't brought into the Beis Hamikdash, onto the Mizbeach. You basically took the paraduma to a place called the Har HaMishcha, the Har HaZeisim. You made sure that it was a place in Har HaZeisim where it didn't have tumas meis, there was no kvarim there. You shechted it there, and then you burnt it, and then used the ashes as part of the process to be matar somebody who's tama from tumas meis. So here the Brisa talks about at what stage can you be paida the paraduma, if you want to be paidet. You want to transfer the kedusha to something else. V'tanya para nivdas al kol psul sheba. any minor psul you find in this paraduma, you right away could transfer the kedusha, it can be paided. Mesa tepada. Even if it dies before it's shechted, you can be paided. Nishchata, or even if it was nishchata tepada. Motza acheres noem tepada. Even if you found something that's more beautiful, right? You have to bring from the best of the best. So let's say you found the more beautiful one. Here, we're saying it's l'shchiach only 7 in 900 years, and all of a sudden, matzah acheres noem. Okay, whatever you found the nicer one, tipada. Shchot al gaba marachta, ein lo p'dir lamis. Once you shechted it on the maracha on Har HaZeisim, then it's already muchsher. You started the avodah itself of shechting it on the maracha. Then we don't allow you to be paided. Says the Gemara, says Abaye, how can you be paida a paraduma if you find something nicer? The only way we can be paida is if lev bezin masna lein. Why? Because paraduma is presumably kedushas haguf. Yeah, the para itself is kaddish, right? The gufa para, and here it's mafurish that you can be paida, right? A paraduma at any stage until the shchita al gabe maracha. How? The only way you can be paida is through lev bezin masna lein. So you see that you say lev bezin masna lein even by a dovar de lo shchiach. So if you say by dovar de lo shchiach, so why do you say lev bezin masna lein by a parva social mekapurim that was lost? You told me because lo shchiach and shani avudin lo shchichi, but here it's lo shchiach the case, so we say lev bezin masna lein. Says the Gemara shani para de kache bede kabayasi, because paraduma is not kedushas hagov. There's no kedushas hagov to paraduma. It's kedushas damen. Right? It's not nikra von the mezbech. Gemara says yachi mesa inishchata tipada hobi'inon amoda v'arocha. So what do you mean? So if you're going to with the din of regular pidyon, kedushas damim needs to go through the process of pidyon. If it's als tanai of lev bezin masna lein, okay, so then for some reason we don't. The mechanics work differently. But if it's regular kedushas damim and you need regular pidyon, the classic case of a pidyon requires amod of arocha. Amod of arocha means where you have to stand up the animal in front of the kohen has to evaluate it to see how much it's worth. But if it's dead, Mesa inishchata tipada bin amod of arocha, how could you stand it up in front of the kohen? Or at least it has to be roi lahamod of arocha. It has to be roi to be stood up in front of the kohen. Gemara says, Hamani, you're right, okay, no, there's not such a kasha. Reb Shimoni, the Omer Kachem Mizbecha Bechlal Amad Varocha, Kachem Bedekabais, Lo Bechlal Amad Varocha. Kachem Bedekabais does not need Amad Varocha, only Kachem Mizbeach. That usually Kachem Mizbeach that have a mum, you're allowed to be paid that's subject to the regular laws of Pidyon, so that needs Amad Varocha. But Kachem Bedekabais doesn't need Amad Varocha, according to Reb Shimon. And since Paraduma is Kachem Bedekabais, it doesn't need Amad Varocha, so it's not a kasha. Ask the Gemara, eat Reb Shimon. If it's Reb Shimon, slow down. This brisa of Paraduma cannot be Reb Shimon. Why not? Because he is Sefer. The Sefer won't match, it won't fit with Reb Shimon's opinion. Because the Sefer says, Shchot agaba merachta in lapdir lamis, you can't be paid it once. You shechted on the Maracha, Vatanya, Reb Shimon Oimer, Para metama tumasaychlin. Hoy voice, Lashasa Koisher. So just very quickly, Rashi gives us a little bit of a background. Rashi says that according to Reb Shimon, Isurei Hana cannot be metama tumasaychlin. Isurei Hana cannot be metama tumasaychlin, which means that if, let's say, a sheretz touches Isurei Hana, oichel that's aser ba'ana, that oichel that touches other oichel, that other oichel doesn't become tamei. It cannot be metama other oichel b'tumas oichlin. Why not? Because he learns from a pasuk, Mikol oichel asher ye'ochel yitma. Right? Only something that can be fed to others, that becomes tumah. That's subject to the laws of tumah. But Isurei Hana that cannot be fed to others is not subject to the laws of tumah. And yet, Reb Shimon says a big chiddush. Reb Shimon says a para aduma, the basar of the para aduma is metama tumas oichlin. What do you mean? A para aduma is aser ba'ana. Says Reb Shimon chiddush. Hoy voice lashasa koisher. Since there's a shas hakoisher, what's the shas hakoisher? Amar Resh Lakish, Amar Reb Shimon, para nivdas al gav marachtam. Because the para can be redeemed even once you shechted on the maracha on the Har HaZeisim. So since it could be redeemed, says Rashi, like right, if you find a noah meno, if you find whatever reason you have to redeem it, you're allowed to redeem it even at that stage, that late in the game of nishchat al gaba marach to be allowed to redeem it. Reb Shimon holds in kol HaTorah kula ha'omed livdos kapadi dami. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. We're approaching like Boimer. Geschmack to talk about Reb Shimon, the Heilige Reb Shimon. So ha'omed livdos kapadi dami. So Mamela, it's considered already now oichel shati yochel achila acherim. So oy bazoi, Reb Shimon holds because of his svara that para nivdas al gav marachta, that can't fit with the brisa. You tell me the brisa says Reb Shimon. The brisa says you cannot be poided al gav marachta, so it can't be Reb Shimon. Elo, says the Gemara, I'll tell you the truth. Truth is, we don't need to come out to Reb Shimon to answer this kasha. It's not Reb Shimon. You just disproved this teretz that's Reb Shimon. But you're asking, you don't say lev bezdin masna alein in a case of loishchichi and paraduma. Ein lecha loishchichi gadol mizeh. Right? There's nothing more loishchiach than a paraduma. So how could you be paid it if you don't say lev bezdin masna alein? Shani parahel v'demer yakarim. Since it's really expensive, then even if it's a loishchichi, right? It's so valuable, it's so expensive that lev bezdin is masna alein, even though it's loishchichi. Omar Mar, says the Gemara, Mesa Tipada. We just said the paraduma, right, even before it's shechted, it just drops dead, can be poided. Asks the Gemara, what are you going to do with it? It's nevela, you can't eat it. Right? It wasn't shechted. If you poided as a kacham lachin leklavin, for what purpose are you going to be poided? You're going to feed it to dogs? The hide. You can use the hide. You can use the skin. So Bezdin is going to go out of their way and make sure that they have the tanai on the paraduma in the case of meses, so you can have the skin. Amar Kana, yes. Amri inshi migamla una. That even from a gomel, from an expensive animal, even the ear, if you give me the ear, it's kedai. Even a small tiny piece, right? Even the oir of a paraduma, it's so shchiach, it's so expensive, it's so valuable, that, Bezdin would go through the trouble of making sure that it's included in the Tanai, so if it's Mesa, you can at least get the skin. Says the Gemara, Eisevei, Amru loy Reb Shimon ma'u sheyikirvu zeh b'zeh. In the Mishnah we had the whole conversation between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim, right? They asked Reb Shimon, what if you want to be makriv the Sor Rosh Chodesh for Pesach? Can it achieve that same kapara as the shiur regolim achieve, even though it was designated and set aside as the Sor of Rosh Chodesh, which is a whole different kapara? Right, Sor Rosh Chodesh is for Torah Shachal Satame, Sor regolim is for Ein Lidia Loi B'Tchila V'Lei B'Soif. So they asked him, yes. What do you mean? They don't have a similar kapara. Each Sor has a separate kapara. How can you use the Sor Rosh Chodesh to achieve the kapara of a Sor regolim? No, it's okay. They're all under the umbrella, the headline of Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, so it works. Gemara says, why did Reb Shimon have to answer such a dechik to get teretz? He has a better teretz. V'amai lema leiv bezin masna lein. Let him say a much better. According to Rabbi, Rabbi's chiddush is today's daf. The big chiddush of Rabbi is lev bezin masna lein. So the kasha is, let Reb Shimon answer that if the Sor Rosh Chodesh wasn't used for Rosh Chodesh the way it was supposed to be used for Rosh Chodesh, so now Lev Bezin Masna Lein says that whatever it ends up being used for, that was the Tanai that it should be used for, that it should have that kind of kedusha. It's a much better teretz. Reb Shimon ka'amrit. Now you try to answer Reb Shimon Leslie Lev Bezin Masna Lein. He doesn't hold of it. The Amr Avidi Berav Namar Rabbi Yochanan Tamid L'Shotzich L'Tzibur L'Divrei Reb Shimon Ein Nivden Tamimim L'Divrei Chachamim Nivden Tamimim. Clearly, Reb Shimon argues in the Chachamim and Rabbi Yochanan, who say that you can be paida, the leftover karbonis, even though they're tamimim, because leiv bezin masna lein. Reb Shimon clearly argues on that. So what is he going to do with the leftover karbonis? We'll see Meretz Hashem in tomorrow's daf. What Reb Shimon holds, what does he do? If he doesn't hold of leiv bezin masna lein, you can't be paida. So now you just have animals roaming around that are supposed to be for the karbonis tmidin, right? They're supposed to go for the tamid, and you can't even use them because it was bought with last year's funds. So what do you do with them? So that's coming attractions.